So I found out my dad died this morning. Um, and it was a surprise. I also just got back from a Vipassana course last night. I went to England for it and came back to California. And it was the way things worked out just felt predestined in a certain sense. And that, I mean, today I want to talk about death and I want to talk about Vipassana meditation. Per Josh Goo's request, Josh is in our community and had asked me a while ago to speak more about Vipassana and what the courses are like. And I wanted to talk about that as it relates to death, since my dad's death just happened, and also about the law of attraction, because Vipassana I've come to understand through, this was like, I guess, the 18th course I've done, that the law of attraction is very real. You know, I believe that we live in a universe where like attracts like, and that's one of the primary laws governing this universe, natural laws. And something that I didn't catch in the Vipassana courses until I think maybe the fourth one I did, third or fourth, is that the teacher Goenka says that, to paraphrase, he says, the law of nature, Dhamma, what we're aligning ourselves with through Vipassana, takes care of the mind's volition. And the first time I heard that and the meaning of it really sank in, I was able to understand the way that connected to my previous understanding of the law of attraction, and that like the law of attraction exists, but we have so much unconscious shit, just like garbage below the level of consciousness inside of us. And as that's governing our behavior and driving us in these ways that we're not aware of, that brings us into contact with things that we consciously don't often necessarily want to have contact with, right? I mean, now I'm thinking about my dad, and like, so he was a narcissist. I think it's somewhat rare, pretty rare, that like that narcissists are diagnosed, because they're perhaps the least likely group to go see like a psychologist or some kind of therapist. But, you know, if you looked at a list of the qualities that a person with narcissistic personality disorder shows, he showed a lot of them. And so that was when I knew I grew up in a household I've mentioned before in this podcast where I had a narcissistic parent. And so it's weird now thinking that he's gone. And one thing that can live on from a person is the trauma they cause, which is a strange thing. I've never like articulated that way to myself before. And then it's up to the people that they touch to heal that trauma for themselves. We all have to heal our own trauma. But I think the reason I went there is that something I found that's really interesting through Vipassana and really practically, like just so super helpful, is that, you know, because that's what I knew, because I grew up with a narcissistic parent and I was like the scapegoat kid who was targeted. I dated narcissists for years, and the way that I was treated just felt familiar. So even though I knew I didn't like it and was angry about it, or like it caused a lot of grief, I just kept repeating that pattern, because the word they teach you of Vipassana is the word Sankara. It's a Pali word, and Pali was the language the Buddha spoke. It means something like formations, but essentially, when my understanding of it is that when we have this trauma that we hold in our bodies that we haven't healed and released and even necessarily felt entirely, it shows up in these sort of formations, these Sankara. And so I had this Sankara that was about this resistance to being around narcissists. And there were many facets to it. Like it wasn't just thinking that on some semi-conscious level that I deserved that type of treatment, because I totally believed that I did, or I wouldn't have aligned with it for so long. That was an important part of what led me to attract it. But then there are other pieces of it, like a fear of being attacked, because that happened inexplicably and happens, I think anyone who's grown up with a narcissist knows that that's something that is just there, and it's not there often isn't any kind of way to predict it. And so that was another piece of the Sankara, like another, maybe a separate Sankara, another facet of the same Sankara. And as I've gone through Vipassana courses, it's like one thing that he tells you toward the end of the course is that the way you know it's working, there are several ways that you can tell if Vipassana is actually helping you out in your actual life. And one way is that, for example, if a situation happens that previous to practicing Vipassana, that's similar to something that happened before you started doing Vipassana, and you realize that, like the situation would have made you angry for 8 hours before, and now you're only angry for 6 hours, that's a sign of progress. And that really is how it works. It's a gradual thing. You're gradually releasing these sankhara that have built up within your energetic body, which often have physical manifestations, by the way. Like, my lower back, I've had so many lower back issues over the years, and I fell like probably 8 years ago or something and landed on this part of my lower back. But I think I was holding a lot of like trauma about not being supported in my lower back. And I think for that reason, it attracted that injury. It made it likelier that I would also like physically injure that particular spot on my body. And through Vipassana, I've released so many layers of that. And so it was interesting at this past course that I just came back from yesterday. I was aware that like my lower body, that's an interesting Freudian slip kind of maybe. My lower back wasn't bothering me at all. And it had been like so at the forefront in earlier Vipassana courses I did as stuff was coming out of that part of my body. And I've been working on it physically too. I'm like going to this gym where like they help you with injuries. And so there's like this physical component that's big time helped as well. But the psychosomatic component, Vipassana can take care of that better than anything else I've ever seen. I think Josh had been interested particularly in like the structure of the courses and how that works and whatever. Again, like on a practical level, when you start out, they're 10-day courses, which in our modern world sounds like crazy fucking long, I think, to a lot of people. Or I remember when I was going to my second course, the guy I was dating at the time, who was a narcissist, said something about how going away for 10 days to meditate and be silent, you're silent for the better part of like 9.5 days or so. He was like, that sounds extreme. And in the context of the way we live today, particularly in the West, it does seem certainly unusual to go totally off the grid for that long, because we're fucking online all the time. But when you think about it, the way that we live, you don't even have, I think a lot of people that would listen to this podcast probably already feel this way, that, the way that we live is pretty extreme and is headed in directions that are really already showing how damaging they are. But yeah, I don't know, that was just this guy's reaction. I didn't find it extreme. And as I've learned more about the structure of the courses and like the history of the way they've evolved, apparently there was a teacher in Burma, Ledi Sayadaw, who I think he was teaching at the end of the 19th century, and his thing was that he didn't think that you could get any true insights into the nature of reality unless you sat for at least 30 days. But then teachers following him, and I think he was involved in these discussions as well, it became clear that lay people that weren't monks, people that weren't monastics, going away for 30 days, especially when you're just starting out, was too much to ask. So they experimented with shorter courses, and I think they did 20 days and then got it down to 10 days, and then they even tried a 7-day. But then they discovered that with the 7-day, it wasn't long enough for people to really grasp the way the practice works and to see real benefit from it. So they stuck with 10 days. And I actually met a guy when I was in clown school in France 2 years ago. There weren't too many Americans there, but this guy was another American. And I think he asked me to dinner or something. We went to dinner, and he was talking about how he'd gone to a course. I think it was one of the Jack Kornfield courses. I could be wrong, but I'm almost certain that it was. Jack Kornfield was a student of Goenka's who started teaching probably sooner than he should have. And I think Jack Kornfield's done things that are, he's shown himself to not be super mature as a meditator. And as a result of that has sort of like set things up such that in some ways they're doing a disservice to meditators. And this is one way. I mean, I've never gone to his center. I felt this sense that for the reason I just described, I've never gone to the facilities that he's set up. But my understanding is that he went to Goenka courses in India in like the 70s and developed a little bit and then came back to the States and tried to bring it back, but thought it would be too intense for Westerners. So tried to make things easier. And as in this example with this guy that I knew in France, he said that he'd gone, it was like his first course and it was a 7-day course. And he was having, like good experiences with metta, which is metta is loving kindness. It's a specific kind of meditation where you're sending loving kindness outside of yourself. Vipassana is different because it's restricted to the framework of the body. And then a Sankara came up basically, and he just freaked the fuck out. And he was terrified because there wasn't enough support structure there to help him get through it. And then the course just ended. So it was like he was in the midst of this, they call them storms, they refer to them as storms at the Goenka Vipassana courses. And he just like was left hanging. And he said he spent like thousands of dollars talking to his therapist in the following days just to like essentially get back to a place where that stuff was suppressed enough that it wasn't interfering with his ability to function in like the external world. And so he was really scared of going back to that place. And I'm just sure if that happens at a 10-day, there's more space for you to get the sense and learn through experience that stuff like that can come up. I mean, I've had experiences at Vipassana courses where I felt like this is what it's like to go crazy. Like this is what it means when people say they're going crazy. And then it passes. And you notice that some part of your body, not every time, but a lot of times, then you'll realize like, oh, this pain I was feeling in this specific part of my body or this discomfort, it's gone. And then you really start to see how it really is about the sankara that are coming up on the surface, and releasing them. That truly is what's driving these like intense feelings of discomfort or pain. So the structure of the courses is such that they're 10 days long. Like that's what their experimentation led them to realize was like the shortest you could do. So if you wanted to go to a course, dhamma.org is the website, and the first course offering you would do would be a 10-day. And you can see the timetable there. And I don't know if I want to, I mean, I'm happy to, if anyone has questions or whatever, I'm totally an open book and I'm happy to answer whatever you want. But yeah, I mean, you can just see online like what their schedule is. And the way it works is that the first 3.5-ish days you practice what's called anapana meditation, which is observation of the breath. And then through that, your mind sharpens, and you're also in this environment where you're not breaking your shila, which is morality. It's foundational in that your shila needs to be strong in order for you to be able to focus enough to do the anapana meditation effectively. And by that, I mean, when you start out, you'll notice that like you take a few breaths and then your mind wanders. And then eventually you realize like, oh, I'm supposed to be observing my breath, and you bring your awareness back to your breath. But then you develop to a point, like I realized, I said to the teacher at this course I just did, and I still have a long way to walk on the path, but I'm now able to, when I do anapana, I can do it without my mind wandering away from awareness of my breath for over an hour. And it probably took, for me, like, I don't know, I think I first noticed I could do that and started timing it like maybe 5 or 6 years in or something like that. It's been, as of this recording, as of now, it's been almost 9 years since I sat my first course. And it's not like I was practicing every day. For the first couple of years, because my shila was so terrible because I was drunk, like I was drunk all the time, I couldn't do Vipassana outside of a course for like the first 2 years following my first course. It just like physically was impossible. I could do anapana, but Vipassana wasn't there. And it became very clear that it was because I was drunk so often. Breaking the shila that you're supposed to maintain in order to have that strong foundation is so no intoxicants, don't lie, don't steal. And a big part of the reason the courses are silent is to help you keep from breaking your shila in some dumb way that so often people aren't honest when they're speaking, like, or, you're just making small talk and you leave something out or whatever. So the silence helps you to avoid breaking your Shila and sabotaging your meditation in that way. And I think it's like a really like cool component of the design of the courses. So yeah, don't steal, no sexual misconduct. I think it's interesting that sounds quite sort of open to interpretation. But that's another Shila, another part of component of Shila that you're not supposed to break in order to, if you break it, you notice that your meditation becomes more difficult. And I'm forgetting one. There's a fifth. I'm not going to look it up, but if you want to, you can look it up. But the design of the courses is such that you're kept busy and you're provided for so that you don't break Shila while you're there. So you have that foundation. And then the next sort of layer that you have to build on top of the good, strong Shila is samadhi, concentration. And that's what you're building through working on anapana. And then once you've sharpened your mind over a few days of doing that, then they bring you into what's called panya, wisdom, which is what you start to develop through Vipassana. It's a knowledge of the true nature of things, that everything is impermanent, like every fucking thing. We're all gonna die. Everything that we see that's like part of the physical world is going to decay and pass away at some point or another. So you learn Vipassana on the fourth day, you're taught Vipassana. And you're just following the timetable and you're meditating, and he gives a discourse every day from 7 to 8 or so, 8:15, 8:30, depending on different days it's a little longer. And you move through the 10 days in that way. You arrive on what they call day 0, and you have dinner there, and you start that night, the night of day 0, and you leave the morning of day 11. And that's how it goes. Goenka, the teacher, talks about how, and tries to encourage people. He says that a lot of people, if they're going to leave, if their minds aren't strong enough or whatever to do that, to go through a course, they'll typically, the sankhara that like chase them out of the courses typically come up on day 2 and day 6. And Goenka himself almost left on day 2 of his first course. And I think about that a lot. At that time, you could talk at the courses. I think that Goenka introduced Noble Silence in large part because of his experience, because it was because people were talking that he was aware of this, I think. But yeah, other people seem to be doing better in their meditation than he was. And he was afraid that because he was like a rich businessman, he wasn't a good enough person to be able to do as well as these other teachers, these other good people that were sitting in the course with him. And he says that another meditator who was a teacher, a professor of history at a local university, heard that he was trying to sneak out and came and talked to him and just asked him, like, just try for one more day. You were doing such a good job in the first day. You were getting such good sensations. Just give it one more day. And so he did, and things clicked. And yeah, I like thinking about that because, I feel such gratitude to that woman who talked to him. And it just makes me think about how these small actions that any of us take could have this tremendous, like if that hadn't happened, Goenka scaled this up so that there are 200 plus centers around the world, and they're free, and you go and you get fed and you get housed and you're just cared for free. And they work, they're very well run, almost without exception. Certain centers, if the people running it have sankhara that are getting in the way of running it well, you might notice that, but it's quite rare in my experience. So yeah, it's just like all of that could have been missed if this person hadn't been kind enough to say like, and brave enough or whatever, hadn't cared enough to go up to him and say like, hey, just give one more day. Like, just try for one more day. Keep trying to meditate. So yeah, that's the structure of the courses. But then, the stuff that comes up is crazy. Like in my first course, it was almost 9 years ago. I turned 29 at the course. So when I was 28, a few days before my birthday. And I just remember a lot of rage coming up, so much rage and repressed memories of being raped as a teenager. and also in my early 20s came back to me. And it was like I had known that I had like emails that I'd written about the rape that I was able to find afterward, but I had repressed it. I just split it off, compartmentalized it. And it's such a strange thing. Like, yeah, I mean, we do that. And through Vipassana, it was like I reintegrated it and was able to heal from it. And I remember in like the 4th or so course that I did, a similar thing happened in that the same memories were coming back of the rape. And I realized like, wow, the negativity, all of the, the awful emotions that you go through if something like that happens to you, they were gone. And so then what was left was just like this sense of being able to forgive and this sense of compassion. And it made me feel like, oh, I finally understand what forgiveness truly is and how to actually do it. Like, I remember there's this movie Philomena, if anyone has seen it, with like Judi Dench and Steve Coogan. And I remember I saw it at the theater in Oakland, this like cool indie theater or whatever. I think it was in 2014. And she forgives these nuns who did horrible things to her when she was like a girl. And she's just like, I forgive you, to the one bad nun. That nun's very old. And I remember when that happened, I was just crying and crying. And I was just trying to understand, like, like I grew up in a household that like they said they were Christian, and like we went to a Christian church every Sunday. And the Bible and so many religious texts tell you to forgive. But like, how do you fucking do it if you're so hurt and angry about something? How do you do it? And through experience, I know that if you just do Vipassana, sooner or later, you'll release all of the negativity surrounding any experience you could have possibly had. And then it'll just be like when I think about that particular person, that guy that raped me, there's like nothing really there. I mean, I think when I progress further, I'll get to a point where I feel compassion for everyone consistently all of the time. And I felt like in this last course, my compassion did develop considerably, specifically for people who I felt were hurting me or had hurt me, which has been a big thing for me, just like, especially because I think I can feel people's stuff, like that empath thing. And I would get so tired and bogged down by their stuff. And I would feel frustrated or angry that they hadn't healed their shit, or like, in a lot of cases, like somebody isn't aware that they're even doing something that's harmful to others. And I would try to talk to them about it and get like attacky responses, which I think also then goes back to the law of attraction. And that's something that happened growing up in my household. And yeah, man, that's starting to clear. And so the fear I have associated with that is starting to clear as well. And I think there's going to be like a lot of joy and fun on the other side. I think I'll start to remember how to be fun again. But this thing about people, which relates to my dad, he was sort of the originator of this for me in this lifetime, is still there, it hasn't quite cleared. And I feel like I'm kind of really sitting on this wound today, or at least I was earlier. And now I'm a little more removed from it, it feels like. I don't know. And then there's like, I don't know what I'm going to do about, I guess he died of COVID, like COVID pneumonia. And he was 67 years old. And, so he would have been in the first batch of people that was able to get a vaccine. So at this point, I don't know if that meant that like he just refused a vaccine. I know he really liked Trump, but I never knew him to be like anti-vax before this. So I don't know if that's the reason this happened. He lives in a really small town and wouldn't have been out around people, but it's like a situation where a lot of people there probably weren't wearing masks and were maybe anti-vax. Why did I bring that up? Yeah, I don't even know if like COVID funerals are, I think people are doing those now. You just stay further away. But the other interesting, I guess, thing about this, to my mind, in the context of like ascension and moving to 5D and getting out of the energies that we've been in for so long that aren't serving us, is just the sense of like, I went no contact with my family almost entirely after trying everything else I could think of for many years. And I did that in like 2018. I still had a little bit of contact, particularly some over email with my mom. But I haven't physically seen any of my immediate family since then, since like June of 2018. And everybody died. Like my grandfather passed away then in early 2019, and I didn't know that he died when he died. They didn't tell me. They like emailed an old email address that I didn't check. I didn't know that he died. And they got like a response that said like, email me at this other address, and they just didn't do that. So I wasn't aware that he had died until after the funeral. But then like my dad was an only child, but my mom had 4 siblings, and one died as a teenager, but then the other 3 are all living. And I'd always felt growing up that my mom and her siblings, 3 of them ended up having partners, ended up getting married. At least I never met any of my aunt's partners, and she never married. But I always felt like my mom's side of the family, like the Thornhills, they all like married people who were at like a lower vibration than they were. And with what's going on with ascension, I can't remember like what spiritual person was talking about this idea, but I think it was a Dolores Cannon thing, actually, if anyone's familiar with her. But yeah, I'm almost certain it was. It was this idea that like we had to get through July 2019 without like creating another nuclear holocaust or similarly energetic event. And if we did that, then we'd be able to start, ascension would accelerate. And so we managed to do that. Trump didn't like hit a button that like dropped a bomb. And I really did feel like things I thought started to change around that time. So then that grandfather, who was 99 years old, my dad's dad, so his dad just died 2 years ago when he was 65. Actually, it was just before he turned 65, and then my dad died now, and I'm 37. It's strange, you know, like, my dad didn't want to be here, though. I think he was really miserable for a long time. I think after I removed myself from the family, he turned a lot of the energy that he used to put out at me inward. And I think it did help him heal to whatever extent that was possible for him this time around. Which is the other thing about anyone out there in a narcissistic family. Something I came to understand is that when I made decisions like going no contact with him, which I knew were healthiest for me, they were also healthy. If they truly are healthy for you, they're also healthy for other people. And it was once I stopped being like the dumping ground because I physically removed myself from the situation, things did shift. But yeah, so his dad died, and then in April of 2020, my uncle's wife died, and then my other uncle's wife died like 6 months later, and then my dad just died, today. So it's like it just feels strange. Like it just seems so vibratory to me. They were all at this lower vibration, and I think they couldn't come through what's happening now energetically. And I thought that for a while. Like, I was surprised. This is trippy to say, and it's not that it's convenient now, but I was like surprised. I was like, how is my dad still around, like in these energies? And then this happened, and it just feels like I don't want to sound like callous to say it makes sense, but I think it does. I mean, and like everybody dies. Another cool thing about Vipassana is that it's ultimately about preparing you for death and understanding that, it can be promotion or whatever. There's that belief there in past lives and continuing lives. And you don't have to believe in past lives to benefit from it. It's just, you can get a present benefit in a practical sense. You don't have to believe in any of the theory. Like, you can just do the practice and see if it helps you. And then you can choose to keep doing it if you find that it does help you. So it's just like, they're gone. Those folks cleared out. And it's just interesting to me that I always thought that they were at that sort of lower level, and they all left kind of quickly. And I also thought that my dad's mother would see him go, and she's still around. Because there's a lot there. She was kind of complicit in she was more than kind of complicit in some of the particularly bad stuff he did to me. And it just seems like, I don't know, I just felt like it seemed like this way of it going would happen, and it has. And it's really strange. But yeah, I don't know. Vipassana is just like, I'm totally convinced it's the way out. And yeah, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep practicing. I mean, I'm almost 9 years in now, and I'm 37. It'll be cool to see where I hope I can, get to in 20 years. I hope I can reach that place where I'm able to feel compassion for everybody, all the time, and just have it. Apparently you get to a place where it's just like flowing through you. And sometimes you see these people that are really far along, and it is just like, you can just feel how loving they are. And it can be, I find it so moving when I see it. And you can become, like reactions to other people, being frustrated with other people or angry with other people. All of that is also sankhara. And what I'm starting to learn, I still have a long way to go, is that like with social justice stuff, like if I'm looking at like people that like sexually assault or various like hurtful things that are done to feminine energy, I can still get very, very deeply sad about it. I still have that sankhara in me. But it's like you get to this place where you're even more aware of, you're able to see the thing even more clearly, and the negative emotional reactions quiet down more and more so until they completely release. And then you're able to make decisions and take actions that are more helpful to resolving those problems than like anything you could have done from that sort of more wounded place. So it's like, I mean, I also think it's the key to social justice is like a term that's got various connotations. But it's just the key to us evolving is as a society, I think, as it's the key to humanity evolving. It's the key to getting more into the feminine. Like the Vipassana courses are the only institutions I've ever interacted with of any type. They're nonprofits. I mean, they're so well run. They're more well run than any other organization I've interacted with as well. But they get you in. They let you be in feminine energy more than anything else I've ever seen, because they have this really good, well thought out structure, that masculine container thing. And then you can just be in the feminine while you're there and just like heal your shit. And it's wonderful. It's like, it's the most wonderful thing I've ever found. And I worry sometimes that I can't talk about it properly. I mean, I'm certainly not a teacher of it or anything yet. But it's because I'm still in the midst of certain things, certain energies, certain sankhara that like can get in the way of properly sharing about what it is, I feel. But I mean, I think I need to let that go. Like I can just talk about where I'm at right now, and these are the sankhara coming up now, and this is where I am, and it's all, like, it's all steps on the path. It's all like part of that journey, and maybe that can be helpful to other people thinking about it. I think a lot of like quote unquote spiritual people who aren't actually developing necessarily like want to position themselves as though they don't, as though there's some sort of authority. There's a hierarchical element, and therefore don't necessarily want to be super transparent about the gnarly stuff that they have going on that they still haven't resolved in themselves. And like, yeah, so I don't know, I think for that reason, because I still have all this gnarly stuff coming up, that I felt that could maybe give people the wrong idea about Vipassana. But it's all continuation until eventually you just release your shit and like it's gone. And it'll happen in different areas, and you never know when it's going to happen in which area or what. And as you do that, you'll start attracting, healthier and healthier energies in other people and in the world. And that's a lot of what Seeds is about. Seeds incorporates Vipassana into our model, and in practical ways, several aspects about how the Seeds ecosystem work are about borrowing from what works well at the Vipassana courses, like in that you can redeem a single seed to ask for help and receive 2 gifts. And after you've received 2 gifts, we then ask you to either give forward a third of what you've received, or sit a Vipassana course if you can't afford to do that. And that's totally like a translation of what the courses do, where they say, you know, like you can sit a couple of Vipassana courses, but then they'll ask you to volunteer and serve at a course because they're volunteer run before you sit more courses. So yeah, it was just kind of my adapting that idea because I've seen it work so well with the Vipassana courses themselves. And yeah, my hope is that as seeds grows and more people use it and become aware of it, that will help spread Vipassana more so as well. And more people can get happier. It just, like at this last course, I cried a couple times, like, because I felt so much gratitude for Goenka, for the teacher. Because I was recognizing, like I knew this before, but it's like, it's clear, it's stronger now because I've cleared out more of the sankara that were blocking it. But yeah, I just felt so much gratitude for him for like doing all this tireless work over many decades so that we could be happy. Like he did it so that we could be happier. And I am so much happier and so much more peaceful and so much, I can see things so much more clearly than I could, you know, even a couple years ago. It's profoundly changed my life. And I don't drink anymore. I've said that before. Maybe some of y'all have heard me talk about, like, I had this huge binge drinking problem for like 14-ish years probably. And now I haven't had any alcohol or any other intoxicants in like 3.5 years. And it's so fucking easy. Like I don't even think about alcohol, which is amazing to me. And I know it's just that the sankara, it took time, but after a few years, it just left my body. And so I don't care. And so I have this older sankara about binge eating, and that feels like it's loosened up a lot as well. I don't really have that compulsion anymore. It's different though with food though, right? Because as humans, we have to keep eating to survive. Like I don't have to drink alcohol to live. So it's a different type of thing when you actually have to continue using the substance in some way. Yeah, I shared about the rape thing and integrating that experience and healing from it. It's just, those are sort of the bigger examples. My psychic abilities, I think, have gotten a lot stronger through Vipassana. And I mean, you can get into it. Like they do a good job of just teaching you to focus on the practical, experiential, first person thing while you're there. When Goenka brought Vipassana from India over to the West, I think he sort of overly wanted to emphasize the scientific to an extent that I sort of wish he hadn't, because there are all these interesting mystical elements that he felt he couldn't bring in because he thought it would be dismissed as like too woo-woo or whatever. That, I hate that stupid word, but you know, like, so he really emphasizes that in the courses. It's so scientific, like it's results oriented, which totally is. But also if you go into some of the texts, I mean, you can see that as people develop, like the Buddha, and anyone can become a Buddha is the idea, right? So many people develop these crazy powers through the meditation. And I've totally noticed that my psychic abilities are a lot stronger than they were before. I don't even really think I noticed them particularly. And yeah, that's just, it's strengthening and it's really interesting and fun. And I met this girl that I made friends with at the course I just did. It was in England and she was English. And she was talking about how she wanted to do Vipassana in the first place because she read this book about like the powers that you can get. And she wanted to get powers. But then it's a danger because you're coming out of aversion, you're coming out of craving if you're doing it properly, if you're doing the practice properly. And it can be easy to crave like weird psychic abilities or whatever different senses. It can be easy to crave developing those. I know I feel that way at least. And so I think it's kind of good in a way that they don't talk about that so much, particularly in the first couple courses you do, you won't hear about it so much because then you might start craving it, which can then imbalance your mind and then the meditation isn't working. So I mean, it's hard to put it into words. Like I can try and talk about it all day, but you just have to experience it and see what comes up for you and see what happens and start noticing whether or not you're finding changes in your life. But I mean, I'm totally convinced that it's the way out of misery, that it's the way to like truly understand how to become unconditionally happy. And I'm so, so grateful that I found it. And if you're curious about it, like you should totally go to a course. Like I said, there are over 200 centers around the world. and they're free. You can choose to donate at the end if you want to. If you want you can donate so that other people can also sit and learn Vipassana, donate to cover other people's board and so forth, and food at a course. But yeah, it's just that giving model really works. And that's another reason that I feel so confident about seeds longer term. It's just like I've seen what giving first and purifying your mind can do. And so bringing that into a model, an economic model like the seeds model, it's just going to work. I mean, it's been working, but it's just, I know it's going to work at scale and at greater, I mean, we've already helped people in 24 countries. So, I mean, we have been scaling, but like on a much more massive scale. I just know that that's going to happen. So yeah, Vipassana helps you prepare for death, and it helps you prepare for everything. And it helps you attract healthier and healthier things in your life, and it's wonderful. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I should have said this at the beginning, but if you're not familiar with Seeds, if you want to check it out, it's like crypto mutual aid. I funded Seeds. Our site is seedsgives.com, seedsgives.com, and you can redeem a seed to ask for help if you need it, monetary help, or you can help other people in need and receive seeds and thanks. And yeah, it's about building more abundance for everyone involved and bringing Vipassana to people that it connects with. And yeah, if that resonates, you should check it out. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.